Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our video discussion for today, December 28th, 2024. We have a lot to go over today, not with tropical weather, obviously, given it's December, but it is Saturday, so we're going to go over our typical tropical weather things we go over every single week. But we do have a lot to talk about in the severe weather department today because it does look like we could have a pretty substantial severe weather outbreak across portions of the South today and this evening. We'll go over all of the details you need to know, especially if you're in the area that could receive the severe weather. And we'll also go over, of course, our tropical weather things we typically go over every single week. So let's start off with that first, get it out of the way. First off, with the NOAA Coral Reef Watch sea surface temperature anomaly map updated as of yesterday. This map always updates a day behind, but I don't really think it matters. Starting off in the Atlantic, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies remain, especially through the Caribbean and the Eastern Atlantic. Been the case for the last several weeks, especially since the end of last hurricane season, which was several weeks ago, November. Still very far out to talk about how this has implications for next year's hurricane season, but we'll get a little bit more in depth with it as we progress into the new year. But one thing to mention, and obviously, if you are a longtime hurricane tracker, I think this is pretty obvious. This doesn't have much of an implication now for hurricane season because it's still December. We're not even into the new year yet. But especially if this look holds into the winter and spring, obviously keeping in mind whatever happens in the Pacific as we head into next year. If this look holds, if the Atlantic remains as warm as it is now, this will definitely be something interesting to talk about for hurricane next year in terms of whether or not we might get another above normal or active hurricane season of some sort next year in 2025. Although don't want to speculate on how active it could get, given we did that this year and turns out things ended up a little bit different, although it was still very active. But nonetheless, it'll be something very interesting that we talk about as we head into the new year. And for the Gulf of Mexico as well, things are very much above normal. I mean, look at some of these anomalies, 2, even 3 degrees Celsius. And this too, if it holds, will be very interesting for next hurricane season. But this also has an implication for winter and the spring when it comes to severe and winter weather as well, but especially severe weather because of very warm Gulf of Mexico, meaning a lot more warm air and ample moisture for fueling severe weather events, especially across the South and even the Midwest too, as we get into the spring. So this will be something we watch for as well. And I would imagine the severe weather outbreak that we're going to see today across the South is probably fueled by how warm the Gulf of Mexico is, especially given that it is late December. We're just a few days away from the new year, and we're looking at a pretty substantial severe weather threat across portions of the South, especially around Louisiana and Mississippi. But we'll go over more in depth on that in just a moment. Really quickly though, in the Pacific, also remains on the cold side. This will be something we watch into the new year as well. How cold does the Pacific remain? Once again, the two main things: how warm does the Atlantic remain, and how cold does the Pacific remain, or how much does it warm up heading into next year? Because as you see right now, warm, very cold anomalies along the equatorial Pacific. We kind of have a La Nina pattern in place right now. And this too will also have its impacts on the winter and spring, but especially when it comes to hurricane season. The big idea next year will be how cold does this remain or how warm does it get? Meaning, do we remain in La Nina or do we warm up and head towards a more El Nino type pattern in the equatorial Pacific next year? And a good way to look at that is the Nino 3.4, and this is the sea surface temperature anomaly by the NOAA Coral Reef Watch, but this is kind of using a graphical look to look at the actual sea surface temperature anomalies rather than just looking at the map and seeing a bunch of cold. This is the Nino 3.4, and the current value is negative zero point 0.9 Celsius. So this is actually within La Nina threshold. And we've especially seen over the last several weeks, conditions cool down quite a bit, although it's actually kind of capped a little bit. But in general, we're in La Nina conditions. And this is especially interesting given just several weeks ago we were barely in cold neutral. In fact, we were warming up very quickly to a dead neutral. But we've actually cooled down quite a bit. Not sure if this is going to persist much longer, but still, it's very interesting. We're in La Nina conditions, or at least barely. And another way to look at that is through the SOI, which is strongly positive. And this is also important too, because a strongly positive SOI generally means atmospherically conditions are more in line with La Nina. In the 30-day average, we have a SOI of 10 points, almost 11. We're at 10.82. And the 90-day average as well is at 7 points, positive 7. And that positive 7 is important because that's actually the threshold that we generally look at with the SOI to determine whether or not, atmospherically at least, we're more in line with the La Nina. And why positive SOI is because SOI is generally, if you're not familiar with it, it's a measure of the trade winds in the Pacific, and a positive SOI generally means stronger trades, which obviously promotes La Nina development. And we clearly have that in place right now, although over the last several days, at least, it seems like the 30-day average is kind of taken a little bit of a hint, but we're still in the positive territory. And obviously, the big story will be, how does this persist heading into 2025? At least when it comes to hurricane standards, but also for severe weather season 2, because La Nina and ENSO also has a impact on severe weather and United States weather. And that's a perfect segue into the severe weather portion of today's discussion. And you can take a look at the Storm Prediction Center, the latest day 1 convective outlook. You could see we have a moderate risk in effect for the south, meaning a heightened risk for potentially strong winds, damaging and large hail, and potentially strong and long track tornadoes. And the risk is especially heightened over portions of central and northern Louisiana and all of central Mississippi, and even portions of Alabama too. And the overall severe weather risk expands through much of the South, Dixie Alley, as they call it. And once again, the risk is generally there for tornadoes, damaging wind, and damaging hail as well. If we look at the tornado risk, as much as a 15% chance, as well as the infamous hatched area, which means 10% or greater probability of EF2 to EF5 tornadoes within 25 miles of a point, or AKA heightened risk for strong, long tracked tornadoes. And that is definitely a risk to pay attention to. And the wind risk is also strong as well, 45% chance for strong winds, with hatched risk meaning winds potentially gusting at 65 knots or 75 miles an hour, which is hurricane force, by the way, if you're a hurricane tracker. So potential for very strong gusty winds, tornadoes, and obviously the hail too, which is a little bit less of a risk, but still there. And when it comes to tornadoes, if you look at the current National Weather Service, and really quickly just to update this, there are tornado watches in effect right now, and I think there is actually a tornado warning as well active in Texas. But overall, there are tornado watches in effect right now, especially through pretty much almost the entirety of the state of Louisiana, except for portions in the south, eastern Texas, and also into southwestern Mississippi. And I'd imagine these warnings will probably be extended further eastward into Mississippi and Alabama, and probably through other portions of the South as the severe weather sort of system progresses. But there are tornado watches in effect right now. Generally, and if let's just really quickly take a look at one instance from the National Weather Service from Shreveport. Their key messages: widespread severe thunderstorms are expected. The threat is generally this happening right now, actually, but it peaks this evening. And where are we looking at? Widespread through much of Louisiana and Texas and into Mississippi as well. The risk is very high for damaging winds, tornadoes, and also a pretty heightened risk for large hail and flooding rain too. So we have everything on the table, but we're especially focusing in on potentially damaging tornadoes today. Let's take a look at how things are now, though, because we have tornado watches in effect, but there's nothing active yet. But we could take a look at what's happening now to generally get an idea of what to expect as we head towards the rest of the day. And you can already see the latest satellite loop, thunderstorms and convective activity beginning to fire over portions of eastern Texas. And I believe there is a cell in here that is producing a tornado warning, and you can actually see it, I think, on the satellite loop. But this is generally part of a system that is gonna develop. It's gonna develop a much stronger line that'll move through Louisiana and obviously across the South. And very interestingly enough, we have strong storms developing in eastern Texas right now, but through portions of Louisiana and also increasingly through Mississippi, very clear conditions as well. And you could also see by the low level clouds advancing moisture coming from the Gulf of Mexico. So that's where we're going to have that advancement of warm Gulf of Mexico air that'll really set the stage for the severe weather outbreak for tonight. But what is very interesting is as this warm air is advancing, we have clear conditions across the South right now. And this is probably going to allow for a lot of these Cape values to really explode, which once again will also really set the stage for severe weather across the South tonight. And if you want to take a look at it on a radar, this is the current regional radar from the National Weather Service, and you could see storms already beginning to develop in eastern Texas and also across portions of northern Louisiana and also southern Arkansas as well. There's also a small fragment that is right now in Mississippi, and this is probably going to move to the northeast very quickly, and we'll probably get a lot of clearing action within the next few hours. And then as we get into the afternoon and evening, especially through central and western Louisiana, most of Louisiana and central Mississippi will be the breeding ground for where we're probably going to see this radar later today really light up. And you can see right now there's a tornado warning actually in effect just northwest of Houston. Looks like there's a very small sort of cell here that is bringing a tornado warning. We're probably going to see a lot more of these later today, as you would probably imagine. And let's take a look at the HRRR to generally get an idea of the timing. Storms right now, this is the latest HRRR, and you can see basically for right now, I think this is 11 a.m. Eastern time, so this is roughly an hour. So here's how it looks like right now. Storms over eastern Texas, a low pressure developing over northeastern Texas. That advances westward, and as we go through the day, lots of storms begin to develop as the line heads into Louisiana, and then we kind of have a low pressure that develops that strengthens, and with that, you get a strengthening line. And it becomes very powerful as we head into the evening. This is 23Z, so this is 6 p.m. Eastern time, I think. I think this is Eastern time, so this would be 5 p.m. Central time. And look at how strong that line is. And look as well to the east of that at some of these popcorn-looking sort of cells here. These are discrete cells, and this is probably what we're going to watch the most for the long-track tornadic activity, although the focus will really be on this main line that'll move through portions of central Louisiana. It's going to move throughout the entire state, but it really is strongest through portions of central and northern Louisiana. As we get into the early morning hours, or the late night hours, I should say, of tonight and into tomorrow, low pressure continues to strengthen slightly. And then look at that. This is right through central Mississippi. This is 3Z, so this is 10 p.m. tonight. So this is going to be at night, which with a moderate risk is definitely not very fun. You would probably imagine. But very strong line develops. This is where we're really going to get, especially through here, this is where we're really going to get those strong gusty winds, 70, 80 miles an hour, and probably the hail. And then these thunderstorms out ahead of it is what's going to be the main focus with the tornadic activity. It really looks like a classic severe weather setup. And then it progresses into Alabama as we get into the midnight to wee hours of tomorrow morning. And you could see the line kind of weakens a little bit, but it remains strong. So the risk, if you're in Alabama, the risk does not die down for you. And in fact, I think the moderate area extends into portions of western Alabama. And you can see that too, the line remains very strong. So this will be a widespread severe weather outbreak. And this will also extend as well into the Carolinas too. If we really quickly look at the Storm Prediction Center into day 2, much less of a heightened risk as we have today, but there's still a slight risk in effect for portions of Georgia and the Carolinas, and even portions of southern Virginia too. So the risk is there, and it will spread into the southeast as this low pressure kind of continues to strengthen. And we will see widespread tornadoes, widespread damaging hail. And I think the worst part about it is if you actually look at the timing of this, especially as this system progresses into Alabama and Mississippi, it's going to be at nighttime. And we know, especially when it comes to these nighttime outbreaks, they're not fun. And tornadoes, especially strong tornadoes in the night, they're not easy to see. And they certainly cause a lot more casualties because of the fact that they're not easy to see, unlike the day. And it is not a very good situation. So my suggestion is, if you're in any of these heightened risk areas, please listen to your local weather officials when they're telling you, watch out the skies. Watch out the skies. There's probably going to be tornado watches that'll be issued, especially all throughout Mississippi and Alabama later today. They're already in effect for portions of Louisiana. And if you want to keep up to date with the watches and warnings as they come in, really recommend this site, Tornado HQ. This is the website I'm going to be using for tracking tornadoes. And you can see kind of has a list of all of the tornado watches that we're going to get throughout today. And you can see the latest watch out of Harris and Walker County in Texas. And it looks like this warning already ended, so I guess this is already expired. Let me actually see. Let me refresh it. Is it expired? No, it is not, but it looks like, well, yes, it has expired actually. But it looks like a new one has been put in place. And we'll probably get a lot more of these tornado warnings as the day progresses, especially over portions of central Louisiana and central Mississippi. So watch out for this. Watch out the skies throughout the rest of the day today. I might do another update depending on what happens. I might do another update. I might even do a live show if you want that later today, so we can kind of watch the severe weather outbreak as it unfolds. And if you want information on that, go to my Twitter. Search up my name on Twitter. You'll get my account and follow me. And I'll post any updates on whether or not, if I post another video, or if I post an update exclusively on Twitter or X, whatever, or if I do a live video tonight, you'll get the updates there. But I'll definitely update you on Twitter. And of course, if you want updates for whenever I get another video and you don't have Twitter, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to me here on YouTube and like this video and share with family and friends, especially if you know people in the warning area that need this sort of information. If you want to get it out to them, would really appreciate it if you share this video as well. with that being said, stay safe, watch the skies. Hope you are all safe tonight. Hope you have a safe rest of your night. A safe New Year as well, since New Year is coming up this upcoming week. Obviously, if we have another discussion today, I'll notify you on that. Until then, have a great New Year. Have a great rest of your weekend as well. And we will talk again very, very soon.